All right.
Got it. Do you want to pin the panelists and myself?
Yes.
That'd be great. Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to today's Knowledge Exchange. This is our new program where we share information freely to everyone. Today's panel is about tools and software and tool skills and technical skills. So we're really excited to have this session. It's been a question we get a lot about what tools and skills technical communicators need. And so I've got three panelists with me today, and Erin Galloway, who's our Director of Membership and Community Relations for STC. She's our moderator and our helper with the chat. We'll be going through some questions I have for the panelists, but then we will also allow questions in the chat. So if I can keep up with them, we'll take questions as we go along, and then we'll also spend some time at the end answering any questions we didn't get to. So I expect to talk with the panelists about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll save some time at the end. So today's session is called What Tools and Technologies Should I Know as a Technical Communicator? And joining me today are Timothy Esposito. Tim, he's an STC fellow with over 20 years of technical communication experience. He is the Secretary of STC's Board of Directors and past president of the STC Philadelphia Metro chapter, and he lives just outside of Philadelphia with his wife and son. Jane Wilson is also with me today. She leads the information experience team at VMware, which is responsible for the content for all VMware products, as well as the tools used to create and publish that content. Jane is an STC Associate Fellow and previously served on the STC board for 7 years in roles as Treasurer, Vice President, and President. And finally, but not least importantly, is Jack Molisani, who is also an STC Fellow and an owner of ProSprings Technical Staffing, an employment agency specializing in content professionals. He's the author of a book titled Be the Captain of Your Career, a new approach to career planning and advancement, which hit #5 on Amazon's career and resume bestseller list. Jack also produces the LavaCon conference on content strategy and technical communication management. So thank you, panelists, for being with us today, and appreciate all of your expertise. Erin, I think we're going to start with a poll, correct? So we can find out. We would like to know more about who's in the room with us. We've got quite a bit of people attending today. It looks like over 80. So if we could just post that poll and find out who you are, it helps the panelists and myself tailor our conversation toward you. So I'll give you just a few minutes to fill out the poll. Can everyone see the poll okay? Let us know in the chat. And yes, in the chat, we've also posted all of the LinkedIn profiles for each of the panelists. So if you want to get in touch with them after the panel today, you have their contact information. All right, here comes some answers.
This is quite the poll.
Yes.
So many options.
So we like to find out who's a member, who's not in the group, how long, what benefits they're interested in, but also what other panels like this we could do in the future. So it's really interesting to get some of this information. So it looks about 40% of you have answered. I'll give you another minute or two. Now we got about 75%. You guys are fast. We've got a great mix of people today. About 90% now. Thank you, John. We will fix the poll next time we post it. Good point. Okay, Erin, you want to publish? I think that's enough responses to get an idea of who's here. Great, thank you. So we have a lot of STC members here, but we have some that are not, which is great. We'll be giving some information about membership as well. How long? We have a lot of people who are new, but a lot of people who have been here 10 or more years, which is great. It's always great to have some of our longtime members here who can also help out in the chat with other thoughts and ideas. We have benefits, everything pretty much runs the gamut, but we often see networking and education as some of the most popular. And I will mention that today we do have the last day of the Black Friday Cyber Monday deal going on the conference. So if you're interested in registering for our conferences here, you're not going to get a lower price than today to register for it. And then career levels also all over the place. My scroll button isn't working on my mouse today for some reason. Erin, can you read off to me what the career levels are? I can't see that for some reason. Or one of the panelists do that for me?
Sure, I can do that. Career level student 8%, recent grad 1%, TechCom professional 62%, transitioning to TechCom is 25%, unemployed is 3%, not in the industry but looking to learn more about it is 1%.
Excellent. So mid-career mostly, which is good. Okay, well, welcome everyone. That's very useful information for us. So if we could close that, Erin, let me start with the panelists and ask them how they got into technical communication. I like to ask this question because it's really fascinating how people get into the field. So I'll start with Tim.
Okay, so many years ago when I was in college, there was this new thing called the internet where people had to do email, and that was a new thing that you could do using an editor on a Unix box. And the instructions on how to use this were not very clear, and the people in the computer lab were not very helpful. So someone in the IT department said, hey, can you write up instructions on how to use the new email stuff? And I said, sure. And I wrote up the instructions and I put a trademark and copyright for myself at the bottom. And then lo and behold, they handed that out to everyone in the school. Like the professors were handing this out. I'm like, I wrote this. They took off my copyright, but I know I got no credit for it. So I got a job in the computer lab. And then when I graduated, because I had a degree in history and English, I of course went into computer support. And I got a job doing tech support for an ERP software package. And then that led to consulting, developing training materials, and teaching training classes. And from there, I transitioned into being a technical writer. And now I'm a manager at Oracle, where I manage an international team of writers that document our logistics application.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Quite a varied career. How about you, Jane? How'd you get started in TechCom?
Well, I kind of stumbled into it. I think like a lot of folks, I was thinking when you were introducing Jack, I probably could have used the how to be the captain by career, book when I was in college. I started off in college intending to be a computer engineer, a developer, and decided that wasn't for me. And after trying a couple other things, I ended up graduating with a degree in industrial management. But I knew that what I really wanted to be was a college professor. So I went to graduate school. I got a degree in English. I got my master's degree, was getting my PhD. And I kind of realized, I'm not so sure I want to be a college professor either. So looking around at, trying to figure out other things I could do, because I did need to earn a living. A friend of mine had started a career in this field called technical writing. So I decided, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. And it seemed like I could take the business side of what I learned as an undergraduate and the writing side of what I learned as a graduate student and kind of combine them. And I do want to tell a story of how I got my first job, which is I went to there was an alumni career fair. I went to Georgia Tech as an undergraduate, and there was an alumni career fair. And I thought about going because I was looking for a job, but then I was like, they're not going to have anything for technical writers. It's all, everything that's listed is for engineers. And, I don't want, that's not me. And so is it really worth my time? And I wasn't going to go. And my mother said, well, just go. You never know what'll happen. And so two things. One is it's true. You never know what's going to happen. And two is your mother is always right, because I went And one of the companies that was at the career fair was a company called Mapix. And they, when I was an undergraduate, I was a co-op student for IBM. And what I did was I was in the marketing department, and we were marketing a product called Mapix. And during the time that I was in graduate school, that product had spun off and was now its own company. So I stopped at their booth, I talked to them, left in my resume, I got a call, I interviewed, and I ended up getting my first technical writing job, just because I happened to go by there. So it was really a lot of luck, but that's how I kind of stumbled into technical writing. And 20 years later, here we are.
Now, always listen to your mom.
Exactly.
Okay, Jack, how did you get involved?
To play off what Jane said, I did get a degree in computer engineering on an Air Force ROTC scholarship and got stationed at Headquarters Space Division, where I did a lot of technical request for proposal type writing. When I got out of the Air Force, I got a job as a sales engineer doing a lot of technical type writing. Got laid off in the mid-90s, like half of California. Couldn't find work as a sales engineer, but I found a contract for an API technical writing project. And since I'm a computer engineer and can speak API, I landed that contract. And that's how I got into TechCom.
Very cool. That's neat. See, it's very different for each of you, but also some similarities, which is great. So my first question for the panelists is, what software or technical skill or tool do you think every technical communicator needs to know? And related to that, what is the most important skill that everyone needs on their resume? And Jack, I'll start with you, given your background in this area.
Okay. I'm going to give a general answer and then a specific answer. Excuse me. What tools companies are looking for varies by region, by state, by country. So the first thing I suggest everybody do is go to a job site aggregator like Indeed.com or ZipRecruiter and search for technical writers in your area openings. See what they're looking for. Could be Microsoft Word, could be FrameMaker plus Dita, and do your own research. In specifics, I have a job opening right now that I'm having a hard time finding. It's for a Dita technical writer, and Dita is a way of doing structured authoring. If you don't know Dita, get it on your resume. It'll help your marketability. And a good place to do that is a free class by Scriptorium that you can go to learningdita.com. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
Great, thank you. Dita is an important tool, I agree. Jane, how about you? How do you answer this question?
So I'm going to start with specifics and then go general. So I'll do the opposite. I will say that, I will echo what Jack said about Dita. We have quite a few, the past 3 jobs, the past 3 companies that I've worked for have been primarily Dita based. We do Dita authoring. The company that I work for right now is a mixture of Dita, and we also use Markdown. About 1/3 of our writers write in Markdown. And I will say that we are seeing more and more Markdown, especially in smaller companies and startup companies. We interact with several smaller companies. I work for a fairly large company, and we have acquisitions, at least, a few every year, where we bring in smaller teams, and we are seeing fewer and fewer of those companies use anything other than Markdown or Dita. And so that's, if you're looking for an authoring tool, that's a good one. But I'll also say that when we're hiring, we, especially for a full-time writer role, and especially somebody, that we're bringing in at one of the lower levels, if you have single sourcing experience, if you have topic-based authoring, any kind of topic-based authoring experience, or have taken a class in topic-based authoring, if you know minimalism, we're willing to teach you the tools. I mean, right. Teaching a tool is not a big deal, especially when you're making an investment in a full-time employee. For a contractor, I'll say the opposite. You need to be able to walk in and be able to use the tools, and we're looking for somebody who can be, productive immediately. But we're willing to teach tools, but those fundamental writing elements, I think, are really important.
Thank you. So Jane and Jack, you both mentioned Ditto. Someone's asked in the chat if you need coding experience to learn Ditto.
No,
Okay.
No.
No. it
A
doesn't
lot of
hurt.
the tools are going to more WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. It's more important to understand the concept. And if I may take a minute to just explain that, Liz?
Sure. Yes, please.
In a tool like Microsoft Word, you format as you go, and you're assuming you're going to print this out on an 8.5 by 11-inch paper or in a PDF. Nowadays, more and more people are consuming content on various devices. So when you do structured authoring, it knows the device you are reading from and will format the content on the output, not when you author it, right? So say you're on a big screen, you might get 4 columns of text. On a laptop, you might get 3 columns. On a tablet, 2. On a cell phone, 1. So in structured authoring, you are not formatting, it prompts you what to type in. The other half of that is knowing what you can reuse so you don't type the same thing over and over again. So having those 2 concepts, grasping that concept of separating authoring from formatting is the difference between Word and Ditto.
That's very, very clear. Thank you, Jack, for providing that. Okay, Tim, how about you? What tools do you think everyone should have on their resume or in their arsenal?
Well, Jane and Jack already covered a lot of the basics there, the general ideas. So I came up with more of a list of skills, and then I'll move into the tools that support that. So I came up with an acronym while you guys were talking, which is CAIRO. So this stands for, because I just made this up 5 minutes ago, communication skills, adaptability skills, interpersonal skills, research skills, and organization skills. So I'll go into each of those. Communication, you obviously, if you want to be a technical communicator, you need to be able to take complex things and simplify them to write it towards the audience for which it is intended. If you are writing for people that drive delivery trucks and they need to know how to use this is what I do for my job. Okay, you know that they already know how to drive a truck. You don't need to put that in there, but they might need to know what does this button do on the app that they're using. So you have a target audience you write to who is going to be using this. And you need to be clear and concise on that. Adaptability is, okay, we were doing everything in PDFs 2 years ago. Now we're doing things in Ditto, or we were doing things on online help as well. Now we're changing from our source control. We used to use source control A. Now we're using source control B. You need to learn how to jump around and fit into any model market that you're going to be working on. Interpersonal skills are very important because if you're working with a group of people, and my background is software, so inevitably there is a developer out there who is not a happy, cheerful, friendly person that really wants to work with you to get your work done. You need to go to them and say, what the heck does this UI mean? What is this button for? Why is this field called this? And they just growl at you. You need to learn how to make friends with that person and find common ground. And once you do that, you'll discover that they will open up to you and share whatever they want to get anything done. In my job in college, there was a guy in the IT department who was the kind of weirdo guy. He was very, very techie, very geeky, and I got stuck on all the assignments to partner with him because the other people wouldn't go near him with a 10-foot pole. But I found out something that we both had an interest in, and all of a sudden he's opening up and sharing stuff with me and going out of his way to hand things to me without me needing to ask him for anything. So you need to have this ability to work with both the friendly people and the difficult people. Next up I have in CAIRO is research skills. You've been given a big design or a wiki. You need to read through that and figure out what is intended for your audience, what was intended for QA, what was intended for other developers. You need to go out there and understand all of this stuff before you boil it down into the documentation you're creating for this. And the last one, which is very important, is organizational skills, because if you do not structure this content well, no one's going to be able to follow it. So that ties in with the Ditto. How are you structuring this? Or if you're doing online help and it's context sensitive, what is the structure for this? How can people move from one section to another? Which, if the UI is fractured, the help will be fractured if it's tied page by page. How do you get that connection point between all those things so the end user can start at the top and work their way through? So having all of those skills nicely tucked under your belt, what tools you should have, those are the tools that you need to do for your job. If you're working at company A and they say, we are doing everything using ClearCase for source control, you need to have ClearCase under your belt for source control. If they're doing Git, okay, you better learn Git really fast. If they're doing online help, you better have a help authoring tool in your background. You don't need to be a master of it. And my experience is if you know RoboHelp, you can figure out Madcap Flare. You can probably figure out how to author it. They all have similar concepts. So once you get that kind of thing under your belt, you're good. So be not specific into any particular tool like that, but be able to understand the concepts behind those tools. Like Jane said, we can train you on the tools, but you need to have that skill set in the background that the tools will then be able to bring out your end result and make it useful for everyone involved. And that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it just like Jack.
Great. I love Cairo. That's a great acronym.
I was just typing it out. I'm like, hey, this spells something.
I'm
gonna
gonna
go
steal
with
it,
that.
by the way. I'm stealing that.
We gave you copyright annotation in the chat window.
Thank you.
So
Pat gave you copyright. I'm stealing it.
great. So a question in the chat about Madcap Flare kind of leads into my next question, which is, are there free versus, enterprise level or other kinds of tools that you recommend? Is it important to know some of those tools, or is it for those folks who maybe can't get access to a Madcap or something that's proprietary? Are there free tools you would recommend they put on their resume to show that experience in the general idea of a tool? And Jack, I'll start with you because I can tell you.
That's like 3 separate questions, you realize.
I know.
Making this hard, man.
Okay, so yes is the answer to all your questions. There are free tools. There are free copies, trial copies of the paid tools. So you can download Madcap Flare and for 30 days. You can download RoboHelp and try it for 30 days. Create 25 samples, put them in your resume, put it in your portfolio. Because if a company is looking for someone with RoboHelp experience, I'm not looking for a RoboHelp expert, but if I need somebody who can create a topic, that's sufficient training, right? Especially if you can show me how you did that. Another option is buying used copies of these tools on eBay. Just make sure you get the installation CD so it's not a bootleg copy. You also have free tools like the Google Doc Suite. What's that called? Google Docs and Google Sheets. You can learn all you need to know. Not all. There are tools like Microsoft Word that have far more functionality than Google Docs does. But if you're an entry level, that is a good way to get experience with the tool. Now, I'm going to leave you with a story. Back when RoboHelp and Word came out, Word for Windows, I didn't have money for these tools. So I was in my STC chapter. So I contacted WexTech, which made Dr. Help at the time, and said, I would like to review your product for my STC newsletter. May I get a comp copy? And they went, sure, and sent me one. And I eventually became a Dr. Help consultant. You could easily reach out to these vendors and say, hi, I'm writing a review of various authoring tools for my STC chapter, or better yet, for Intercom or the journal. And you can get a comp copy that way. It may be just a 1-year license, but it's a way to get your foot in the door with the tool.
Great, thanks, Jack. Jane, how about you? Are there tools you recommend specifically, and specifically anything free?
Well, I was going to mention the trial versions like Jack did, and I'll also say that some of the bigger tool vendors are moving more to a SaaS model as well. So if you maybe can't afford the whole license, you can afford maybe a month or something like that if you don't want to invest in the entire license. I think everybody knows the big ones. Madcap was mentioned in the chat, and that is still a popular, a pretty popular tool. Adobe FrameMaker, of course. And I will say that the 2 big ones that we have used for Oxygen authoring are, right now we use, for data authoring, I just gave it away. We use Oxygen for data authoring, and we've used XMetal in the past. And also to an earlier point about things getting more WYSIWYG, we are also using Fonto, which is, and we've sort of taken Fonto and built it into a platform of our own, that some of our SMEs can use as well as the writers. But it's more of a WYSIWYG a WYSIWYG tool that you can use to create data content.
Yes, Jack's mentioned the Adobe TechCom suite. Of course, that's a very popular suite.
Mhm.
Another question is, how helpful is Captivate and Camtasia? Anybody want to respond to that?
Any screen capturing tool is valuable, especially if you're going to be documenting software. There's going to be a screenshot somewhere. You can use just print screen and drop it into Paint, but the other tools are a little bit easier to grab and move and document. So yeah, any of the screen capturing. And then I think someone said Captivate, which is a video capturing tool. So apparently I've heard that current generation of content consumers don't want to read. They want to watch a video on TikTok. Okay,
Right.
So now we're video producers. Now it's interesting though, if you are producing videos and you're doing the voiceovers for your company and you leave, they have to find somebody else who sounds like you or bring you back. So there's a certain amount of job security about getting yourself embedded into the video recording documentation team. Just saying.
Yeah. Tim, other tools you want to mention?
So some free tools that I found very useful for basic text editing. I like to use Notepad++, which is like the notepad that comes with Windows, but way, way, way better. And similar to that, and looking slicker, is Sublime Text, which is also free. I sort of switch between the two depending on what project I'm working on. If you're doing video editing, I found there's a free tool called GIMP, which allows you to manipulate images very easily. I haven't used that tremendously a lot, but I've been experimenting with that and it looks pretty powerful. And a lot of our developers use something called Eclipse, and they use that for their Java coding. But you can also use that for XML editing if you want. It's not as super strong with that, but it can be a decent HTML or XML editor in a pinch. Everything else that I say would overlap with what Jane and Jack already said. Get the free trials. My group uses Oxygen. They moved from Arbor Text to Oxygen for the data. We use RoboHelp for the online help because we've been using it that way for 20 some years. But Flare is, from my experience, just as powerful and just as good. Another free tool that you can look into is Git. Git is a source control tool, which is very popular, and my development group is moving to that. And you don't need to have a development group doing that. You can set up an account for free on GitHub and install an application on your machine, and you can do any sort of editing in there and then check it into that for sharing. So it's particularly designed for coding, but if you're designing websites or want any other side little project you want to do and you want to share what you're working on with people, you can use GitHub for free to do that.
Great.
Also, WordPress for doing websites is very popular.
Yep. I saw somebody mention that in the chat earlier that they had been using WordPress as well.
WordPress has a free model that anyone can use, and it's whatever you want at wordpress.com, or you can pay for WordPress and have it hosted on a site where you register for that domain and things like that. And that's like the super techie one, but the free one works pretty well too. That's what I use for my personal site because it's free.
It can be heisted.
It can be heisted?
I thought
Hosted.
that- never mind, go
Hosted.
ahead.
No, yeah, if we want to have a heist, I'm sure you could do that too, but it can be hosted. I misspoke, sorry.
Yeah, Jack's put some of the acronyms in the chat, which is great. SaaS, software as a service. It's kind of like getting subscription, a cloud-based software, correct? And that's the way most software tools are moving. You don't get a CD anymore to plug into your computer, right? I know I didn't ask the panelists this in our rehearsal, but I am also curious what social media you all are using, or how do you communicate among your teams? I know Slack is really popular right now.
Slack.
There's a lot of Slack.
For work, Slack, yes.
Great.
And we actually also use Microsoft Teams as well.
Right. Great.
Yeah. So my company's decided that Slack is the way to go. So they've rolled that out. With my friends, we use Discord, which is a free thing that is for voice chat as well as texting, and you can do video on it as well.
And the STC has a Slack workspace.
Oh yeah.
And Erin's going to put the
Put the link in right now.
She will. So another question from the audience is, what do you need to know if you want to get into online help besides RoboHelp? Who wants to take that one?
So I do a lot of online help stuff. RoboHelp is the tool to get the job done, but like I mentioned earlier, there are several other products out there like Madcap and Doc2Help and AuthorIt. Is Doc2Help still a thing, or did that go away? I forget. I haven't used that one.
There's still Dr. Help.
Okay, so as I suggested earlier, it's not just knowing how to use a specific tool, but it's just understanding the framework for it. So you're creating, in most cases now, a modern web-based documentation. So if you're doing a project, everything is on a web browser. So it's no longer a compiled HTML file that's distributed. It's something that operates as a website. So you're actually using, in my case, RoboHelp, to create a website that is just documentation. What the tool gives you is the ability to easily create an index, a table of contents, and a search thing. So it's all nicely packaged and tied together, so you don't need to worry about manually creating any of that stuff yourself. Otherwise, it goes back to one of my Cairo points of organization. You need to know how to structure that content, whether it's to match the UI or in addition to have a flow for working through processes in that UI.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, I'm going to move on. I know there's a lot of very specific questions in the chat, and we'll go back to those in a minute, but I want to ask one of my other questions, which is what advice, and I know Jack has already provided one place you can get training, but what advice can you provide about those new or growing in the profession for learning about tools? Where and how should they look for training? Jane, let's start with you.
Well, I'll say, I'll go ahead and say the obvious. STC offers some great training. And I think if you have a specific tool in mind, then usually that company will offer training. You can check online with that company. So, you know, I know that Oxygen provides training. I know that you know, Adobe certainly provides a lot of training. And so I would suggest, you know, checking with that company. And the other thing, actually, this is a little bit off topic, but it occurs to me that if you start looking at these tools, if you start getting into tools, if you find that you have a, you know, a skill with using tools and picking up tools very quickly, then most teams are really looking for somebody who is good at tools. You know, that in itself is a marketable skill that you want to put on your resume and that you want to sell yourself as, you know, the tools person for a team.
Thanks, Jane. Tim, how about you?
Oh, do Jack, come back to me.
Jack.
I have two answers to this question. One is YouTube. You can find how to do anything on YouTube, especially something like Photoshop, which is just unwieldy. You can learn how to do anything on YouTube, so start there. To add what Jane said, a lot of the tool vendors do webinars that are free, so you can find that as well. And third is your peers in STC. One of the stories I tell is there's a contract I was applying for that wanted conditional text in FrameMaker for new people. Conditional text is a variable. For example, the Mazda 626 and the Ford Probe, exact same car, exact same user manual. You just change the name and print the manual. So I learned how to do that in FrameMaker, taught myself. And then I said, hey, anybody else want to learn this? Meet me at Starbucks, bring your laptop. So I taught everybody else how to do conditional text, what I learned. Then when I went on the interview, they say, do you have experience with conditional text? I said, no conditional text. I've taught conditional text. Got the job. So it's another way you can do it.
That's great advice. I agree that networking is really important. And also, I would say when you attend conferences, there are a lot of ways to meet some of the tool vendors, ask them where they have courses. Sometimes they're giving out free software that you can trial. So that's another place. Tim, did you come up with anything else? You want me to move on?
I don't have much more to add than that, but find someone that knows it and will be your mentor. Build your network and say, okay, who knows how to use, like I had to learn Git 5 years ago. I'm not the master in Git. I know how to use it specifically for what I do. When my dev team started to move to it 6 months ago, I knew more than the people that were implementing it just because I'd been using it for the past 5 years. They have now surpassed my knowledge because they do way more complicated stuff than I need to, but I was a resource early on for that.
That's great advice. Thank you. Okay, so my next question is about what's changed. So I know we've had a major pandemic. There's been a lot of fast moving change in this field and in the tools. What do you think has changed the most about the needs of tools or skills like these technical skills? And is there anything new that those transitioning, because we have a lot of people who are transitioning these days from another field into tech comm, that they should be aware of right now? Jane, why don't you start?
In terms of the pandemic, I think that a lot of people, the biggest change for me is that you have to be your own IT resource. You know, you have to be able to set things up. You have to be able to, you know, if troubleshoot your own, you know, your own setup and your own skills. So I feel bad for people who started a company and they, you know, they are working from home and they just get a box with a laptop in it. You know, I always rely very heavily on being able to go to the IT guy and say, hey, can you set me up? So, so there's that. The other thing I would say for folks who are looking to break into technical writing and or looking to, you know, look for a new job or go into a different industry is industry knowledge is something that we haven't really talked about. Because if you have a particular industry that you're looking at, or if there's a particular kind of software that you want to document, learn about that industry, learn about that kind of software. You know, if you want to get into a particular kind, you know, take a coding class. You know, I used to work for a company, we did software for railroads. And if we ever found anybody with railroad experience, we would have hired them on the spot. You know, I used to work for a car company. And that was one of our interview questions was, have you ever worked on your own car? Are you interested in cars? Because they were having to write the service manual. And so having that industry knowledge really can put you ahead as well.
Thanks, Jane. Jack, how about you?
I'm going to yes and everything Jane just said. It used to be you saw a job posting and says, technical writer needed, must have frame maker and RoboHelp. Now it's technical writer needed, must have experience documenting networks with a page authoring tool and an illustration tool. And they didn't really care because those skills are transferable. So I absolutely agree with Jane to take a class in whatever field you're interested in, whether that's biochemistry or database administration or forestry. Forestry people need tech writers too. So get that domain knowledge and then the tools come second.
Great, thank you. Tim.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jack and Jane said.
Okay, we got to call on Tim first on the next
I will.
Yes, so yeah, industry knowledge is key. I'm trying to hire a new employee in Bangalore and Hyderabad, and my group makes logistics software. So I'm getting people applying for this saying, oh yeah, I've got backgrounds in this because I have worked on designing instruction manuals for how to fly an airplane. And I said, okay, what we do is routing stuff, like how to put stuff in a container, ship it across the ocean, put it on a train, unpack it, have FedEx, you know, be really late delivering it to your house. So that's what my group does. But the person I'm interviewing was like, I can physically install a propeller on an airplane. I'm like, well, I actually had that in the conversation. I'm like, well, that's great, but that's not helpful for what my job is doing. And yeah, you have some writing skills and you wrote a manual and you illustrated the manual, but we need someone that understands this concept of routing and shipping things versus constructing the train or constructing the airplane or flying the airplane. That's not what we're about. So we've had to turn away a number of applicants because they have the hard skills for that kind of thing, but not the soft skills for what I'm looking for. So yes, you have to have your foot in the door with the industry. And to Jane's point, we actually have a guy that works for us who used to work for Conrail for 15 years, and he is our railroad expert. So the railroad component of our software is driven by that guy, and invaluable resource.
If he needs a job, I can put him in touch with somebody.
No, he's not allowed to leave.
Great, thanks everyone. So I'm going to go back to a couple of questions from the chat. One of them is by Mike Nelson, who wants to know how popular is Confluence for documentation? Tim.
I can answer this one. I have a cousin named Mike Nelson, who I'm assuming is not this Mike Nelson. But my group, I work for Oracle, and Oracle has implemented Confluence as a wiki. So we use that for internal notification only, not for publishing to the clients. So we have our own little domain set up in Confluence for my development group, and the developers put stuff there. I put stuff there for my team. Whenever there's a new feature, whoever is designing that feature in development and product management, they write out what they need, what it's going to do, how it affects QA, and then from that, I glean what needs to be documented. So I use it extensively for my team. Here's the process for setting up Git for this particular scenario. Here's how you download and install the new version of RoboHelp. Here's our team meeting and stuff like that. So I put everything in Confluence, because when my boss left last year, I'm like, where's all of her notes on how to do all this stuff? So I'm the manager now. I'm like, she didn't give me anything on what she's been doing. Whereas I'm like, okay, I have a new hire in India. Here's the process I have to go through to get them a laptop, so it doesn't take 4 months to get there. Here's all the steps. Here's the person I talk to. Everything's in that wiki. So if the bus comes for me, the next person that comes in can go right in and see, hopefully in a relatively organized manner, all the stuff that I would go through for that kind of leadership process. So for me, I find Confluence incredibly useful and helpful. But again, it's only for internal stuff. We don't make anything public that's in Confluence.
Okay, great. So another question from the chat is, what basic coding languages would benefit technical writers who wanted to have an edge? Any thoughts on that, Jane, Jack, Tim?
I would go back to my answer and see what programmers are. Find programming jobs in your area, find out what languages they're programming in, learn those languages.
Good advice. Let's see what else. So here's another question. For Markdown, what publication tools do you use to format the output and organize the content?
Tim?
Wait, say that one again. Something about Markdown. I was looking at the chat.
For Markdown, what publication tools do you use to format the output and organize the content?
Absolutely none, because I've never used Markdown.
So I can answer that a little bit. So the group that we have that is using Markdown formerly used a tool called Bookbinder, and they had a couple of Ruby plugins for the Bookbinder, and that's how they actually they published through a tool called Bookbinder. But what we're transitioning to is we're actually transitioning to a process whereby we take the Markdown, we convert it to, I believe we convert it to HTML and then publish it on our doc site through the HTML. So,
okay.
I don't know. I don't think that's normal, but that's what we're doing.
So there are lots of ways to get the result you want.
Yeah, and the other good thing about Markdown is there are a lot of tools, that you can use to author in Markdown as well.
Right. So something else that's come up a couple times, a couple people have mentioned Udemy and other sites that offer training. I was thinking about, when you all were talking about some of the subject matter expertise people need to have for certain jobs, that there are a lot of sites that offer free courses that you can take at your own pace. I'm thinking of edX, which is one that Harvard and MIT, some of those big name schools, offer some free courses. Are there others you all have come across for that kind of subject matter expertise that you can recommend?
Do you remember lynda.com?
Yes, yes.
I don't even know if that's still around.
I think it is, but it may have rebranded.
Yeah, I thought it merged with LinkedIn or something like that.
Something like that. If you think of them, put them in the chat, because that's something else I think is used. Yep, LinkedIn bought Lynda, somebody's saying. Great. So I have a private message that I want to ask from someone who said, what do you recommend for a newbie and lone technical writer for a company that has no document management system in place and they expect you to set that up? Where does a newbie tech writer start? Jack,
So
let's start with you.
That's almost outside the scope of what a newbie is asked to do.
Yeah,
Right.
that's all. I'd say, well, I mean, you want to do a document management system, and you need to really see how are they managing their code, and what is the output, and what is the tool that you want to use. So if you're using a certain application, maybe that application you're doing online help, maybe that one integrates really well with Git, or maybe it integrates very well with Microsoft Visual Studio. So in which case your document management is going to be what fits into that tool. If you're just storing documents, they must be using something for their code base. So why not store the documents in a special section of their code base for that? That's what we did for years. We used something that was called IBM Rational ClearCase. And we just had a documentation folder for that, and all of the guides and everything were stored in there. And when I did the help builds, it got checked into ClearCase every night. So you need to figure out how to really dovetail with what the development process is already doing and fit into that model.
Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned that person should ask for a raise.
Yeah.
So Liz,
Yes.
there was a question in the chat window I'd like to address about what if you're a secretarial assistant type person?
Yes,
wanting to
please
move
go
into tech
ahead.
writing? This applies to anybody wanting to move into technical writing. First thing I assert that many of us do technical writing, even though our title is not technical writer or technical communicator. If you're writing a policy, if you're writing how to make coffee and posting that on the bulletin board, that's technical writing, right? So the odd thing is, especially if you're applying for a job through a website where it's comparing your title to the job title, don't be afraid to say administrative assistant / technical writer, or assistant to the president / technical writer. And that way they'll see technical writer down your resume, and you will have a much better chance of landing that entry-level tech writing only job. Another thing you can do, especially if you're entry level, is find a nonprofit, like, I don't know, Save the Bay or Habitat for Humanity, and say, hey, do you have some policies and procedures I can write? I will work for coffee and donuts. And that way you can say, from October 2001 to present, technical writing at organizations such as, and list those organizations. Now, nowhere in your resume did you say how much you got paid for those jobs, but it shows that you've got initiative, that you have experience, because it's this weird thing where companies want you to have experience, but you can't get experience unless you have experience. So that's a good way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, that's good advice. And we also started on our Slack workspace a channel for volunteering or finding different kinds of experience roles like that. I know when I was in grad school, we did a lot of free work for different companies in the area. I went to Texas Tech University, and so we did some free work for that, for some of the local companies, so that we could get hands-on experience. And that was a great thing to add to our resumes. So I agree with that. Jane or Tim, do you want to add anything to that?
Real quick before they jump in again, open source tools need to be documented. So
Right.
That's another place you can get experience and stuff for your portfolio. Okay, go.
I'll just say anything that you can put on your resume that shows that you're serious about technical writing, that you're not just, trying to get in the door, or that anything that shows that you understand what technical writing encompasses. I've seen resumes where, somebody's taken some English classes, so they kind of know what technical writing is, or whatever. Anything that, like Jack was saying, if you can show that you've had some experience, do some volunteer experience, I think that's going to help show that, like I say, we're willing to teach, and we're willing to grow a technical writer and provide some education and provide some experience. But, we need to know that you're there, that you're in it, that you're looking for a career in technical writing.
Right. And I think one of the questions that was asked earlier about someone had a book in FrameMaker and they didn't know what kind of document should they start with? What kind of document should they create? Could it be anything, or is there something specific you all would recommend?
I'll go. The best thing you can do is find a really bad example of documentation, hard to read, bad colors, recreate that document using FrameMaker, and use good white space and headings and numbered lists. And that way you'll have a before and after to put in your portfolio.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Very good. Another question we've got, which I think is an interesting one, is whether or not you all agree with Tom Johnson, who's a very well-known blogger in tech writing, that a lot of companies ask for a technical writer, essentially a tools specialist. But what they really need is, quote, a master technical communicator, which is more of a generalist communicator who knows all about user-centered writing and design. And I think from what I've heard from you all, you've all said that you can teach the technical tools, the really specific things that your company uses, but that yes, indeed, having those general skills is what is, you know, the starting place, or what they definitely need. Jane, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. That's
Getting
been
back to
my
what Tim said earlier about Cairo, so much of what we do is not writing. It's
Mhm.
interviewing skills, conflict resolution skills, negotiating skills. You know, your manager says, I need this done by Monday. I go, well, I can do that, but this is going to slip. Or I can do that, but I need some downtime afterwards. So those interpersonal skills, now this is going to sound a little bit out of the blue, but 2 classes you should take to be a successful tech writer. 1, an improv comedy class. That way you will never be thrown off by a question you weren't expecting. 2, public speaking at Toastmasters. And 3, I would take an accounting class. Because anytime you're trying to sell something, whether you're trying to be hired, you want to show that how you are going to help make that company money, or how you're going to help them reduce costs or increase the user experience. So yeah, I would add those to the list of tools to learn.
Yeah, that's great advice. Jane or Tim, anything else? No? Okay, so some other comments in the chat. People think volunteering is a great experience. Don't forget Canva as a tool. One of the questions that came out during one of our other knowledge exchange panels was whether or not people needed to work on a Mac versus a PC, and or do tools all work for both platforms? Does anyone want to address that? I know that's something that someone asked us in a prior panel.
I would like to address that, but circle back to a different question because they're kind of on the same page. A lot of chat was about HTML and cascading style sheets. A lot of these tools, right, will output HTML for you, but sometimes they don't get it right. And you have to go in and tweak things. So I can't write HTML from scratch, but I can go in and edit a hyperlink, right? So you need to be sufficiently familiar with the tools you're using to go in and get hands-on with the code or the output. But most, again, when you get to software that's web-based, it doesn't really matter what machine you are accessing that from, or from which you are accessing for your grammarians.
Yes, and I agree with you about knowing a little bit of HTML. Even I have had to go in and like tweak something that was not showing right. And the best thing to do is just, you can easily go Google something about HTML and figure out how to fix it on your page. So that's good advice. Tim, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I do that all the time. We develop in RoboHelp, and inevitably it does not handle the tags or something in the HTML properly. And why is this bullet indented all the way over here? Why can't I shift it back using the GUI? Okay, switch into the HTML view of it. Okay, it's got some weird things in here. Delete that, clean this out, Same thing with XML. XML is sort of like HTML on steroids. It's very structured, but it uses the same tagging or similar tagging system. So if you can learn HTML, you can figure out the basics of XML. So if you're working on a data document, you can switch out of the WYSIWYG view in Oxygen to look at the actual text view and figure out what are they doing behind the scenes with the tags that you may need to manually edit. So doing things like that, understanding style sheets, someone brought that up. I've designed my own cascading style sheet 20 years ago, and then I took it with me when I changed jobs and based the new one off the old one. So we had relative font sizes and stuff like that all built into it. And that's just been rolling forward for years. So understanding when you're looking at something, how is the style defined? Where's it coming from? You can use browsers. Oh, I'm looking at this corporate website. Well, where is this heading coming from? What does this look like? What font are they using? There's an action in Firefox and Chrome where you can scan and see behind the scenes what exactly they're calling for any piece of text that you click on. And, okay, well, then maybe I need to make my style sheet match this corporate website page. You can pull all that right out of the style sheets that it's referencing. So having that sort of knowledge in the background is very handy.
Great, thanks. Someone else asked about, and I think this will be our last question because we're running late, but as a longtime tech writer, they involved into tech editing. Are there tech editing tools that you all recommend? And some people have put some in the chat, but I'll put it up to the panelists. Tim, you want to start?
I'm not sure what you mean by tech editing tools.
Some people have mentioned Perfectit, Grammarly, that sort of tool.
I have not used any of those.
Okay.
I experimented with
Yeah.
Grammarly for a little bit, but it didn't do what I thought it was going to do, so I got rid of it.
I haven't used those. We, as a team, we currently use Congreve and formerly used Acrolinks. But that may be possibly, more than you want to get into if you are a tech editor yourself. So, but those are two that spring to mind for me.
And Acrolinks is a controlled language tool. So
Yeah.
if your company says you're supposed to click on, and if you just type click, it'll tag that against a corporate style guide. A lot of the authoring tools have built-in editing capabilities, especially if you're sharing content with a subject matter expert and you want them to make comments either in a PDF or in whatever environment you're authoring in. So I don't know any particular editing tools other than the tools themselves.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. I want to give a very big thank you to our panelists for being here today, spending an hour, a little more than an hour with us. I know it was a lot to ask of your time because you all are very busy folks, but we really appreciate it. This recording will go up on YouTube so that anyone who didn't get to attend today can watch it. We do have some upcoming panels for the next couple of months planned. One is, and we mentioned it today, volunteering. So we have a great team of folks who are going to do our volunteering session. That'll occur right after the holiday season, right at the end of December, when everybody hopefully is thinking about giving back. And then we're going to be doing one on certification and degrees and certificates in January. So please join us. All of the Knowledge Exchange events are open to the public and free to attend. So let everyone know. And thanks to our audience for all being here. I appreciate all of you attending and asking such great questions. We will probably do another session or two on both job hunting and tools later in the year, because those have been our most popular topics and everyone seems to love those. So here's some contact information for each of us and also for the panelists. If you have follow-up questions for them, please feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn, and they, grow your network, get to know them, and ask their expertise individually. So Erin, I'm going to send it back to you, and thank you all for attending today.